Hey everybody, welcome to Culinary Characters Unlocked. I'm David Page. On this episode, his Peruvian-Japanese food, dished up at a 10-seat counter in Miami, won him the 2025 James Beard Award for Best Chef in the South, just a year after his sister won it. Here's Nando Chang.
Chef, how you doing? Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Doing well.
You just won the James Beard Award. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Very crazy news. I didn't think we would get anything like this, especially after watching my sister win it last year, but feel very fortunate, obviously.
Well, that's pretty remarkable. Best chef in the South. Last year, it's your sister. This year, it's you. What'd she say to you?
Welcome to the club.
Were you jealous even a little last year when she took it?
No, it's pretty surreal seeing your younger siblings achieve these kind of things. It's pretty cool.
I guess you developed a love for food together as kids. How did that happen? Were you cooking together when you were younger?
We didn't spend much time cooking when we were young, but maybe young in the sense of when we were teenagers, we did. Prior to that, maybe it was just the fact that we lived in Peru for 8-9 years without our parents. We were at our grandmother's house. So maybe subconsciously food has always just bonded us.
I don't want to get into something uncomfortable, but was there a painful period in your life there where your family unit was separated?
My parents were coming out of a Peru that was devastated by terrorism during the 80s and 90s. And they just made the decision to say, we can work in America and provide a better life for our children in Peru. With what they could earn here as entry-level jobs, you could give somebody a much better quality of life back at home. So that's all. It just took us about 8-9 years to kind of get it together. We also weren't doing bad. My grandmother was a great mom.
Well, what role did her cooking play in your life?
My grandma was a very hospitable person. She was the oldest of 9 siblings, so she was the host always. When family came to town, she would always host and cook, and that's kind of how we remember her. We didn't cook with her. Sure, maybe you help her clean snap peas and whatnot, but I guess your memories are, they're all connected. So we always think like all these smells that would be around the kitchen when certain people would come visit. She knew what everybody's favorite dishes were. So if a specific person was coming to town, you would smell certain things. It'd be like, oh, just like my grandfather, her husband, he loved ceviche, and he wasn't able to have it all the time because my grandfather had some complications with his kidneys. And high acidic foods were actually told to him to not, to avoid those kind of foods. But it was his favorite thing to eat. So if you did smell somebody making ceviche in the kitchen, you knew that we were kind of spoiling my grandpa, and we were going to let him have ceviche for that day.
So what did you and your sister eat growing up in Grandma's house?
Lots of Creole food.
Well, hold on. You say Creole, I think of New Orleans. What is Creole food in Peru?
Think of the same, but from Peru, but Creole meaning, this is soul food that comes down from indigenous Peruvian people and what slaves in Peru also brought to Peru. That influence is Creole. It's the same. The sofritos.
What kind of dishes would this have been?
Anything that had off-cut or anything that had to be stewed, I would say for long periods. In Peru, there's a lot of stews. A lot of our hearty dishes really are stews, things that would cook for a long time to tenderize, not the nicest cuts, because usually that's what was given to those classes.
Is that where anticuchos comes from?
Sort of, yeah, absolutely. That is the history of traditional anticuchos, which are heart.
Grilled heart, yeah.
Just like lomo saltado, same, this was traditionally a cheap cut of beef that would be stir-fried. Obviously, as Peruvian cuisine has evolved, I think people now use even filet mignon on a lomo saltado. But our history of Peru is obviously, it's, humble.
This is a complete stereotype, but a lot of potatoes?
A lot of potatoes growing up.
I mean, because there's hundreds or thousands of different kinds, right?
Varieties, yeah, yeah. Now, in the last maybe 10, 15 years, there's been an emphasis on really understanding the variety of potatoes. But as I grew up in Peru, people in the coast didn't necessarily have all these varieties of potatoes available to us. There was a few, which are the main ones, and then you'd really have to look for stuff that comes out of the mainlands or the Andes to the coast, because obviously, logistically, 20 years ago when I was growing up in Peru, it just wasn't available for everybody, you know. But I think now the world knows it.
You were growing up on the coast. Was this a small town?
Yeah, small town, Chiclayo, coastal town near some of the best surf towns in Peru are in the north.
Do you surf?
No, 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 I never did. I did enjoy going to the beach a lot.
So when did you and your sister come to the States?
Right after 9/11, it was December of 2001.
Did that have something to do with it?
No, I just remember that was my first introduction to the mood of the country when I first got here. You know, I had pictured a different America as I was going to come in. You know, I think we were in the process for a good 2 years as we were doing our papers to obviously to apply for a visa. So for 2 years, you're kind of getting this idea in your mind of what the US is going to be like. And then when I got to school, I understood there was a totally different mood in the country.
Were you ostracized as an immigrant?
No, not during those times. I think the emphasis on that time might have been on, unfortunately, on some kids that maybe were Muslim. And I do remember, obviously, a little bit of bullying and things like this that would happen in school, but nothing that I think adults can really help unless they're really educating their children at home. And, you know, usually kids are in school are going to be unsupervised and, you know, going to be tough.
So you're in the States.
Not the country that you had hoped. I mean, obviously it was grimmer. The mood had changed. But you're back with your parents. How was your life?
It was great. It was challenging. We lived in a one-bedroom apartment with my dad. So my sister, my dad, and I were, you know, my dad had quite literally spent all his resources, obviously, in prioritizing the paperwork and the money that it takes for you to file and do these things, which was a lot.
Not to be intrusive, but I'm inferring here that your dad and mom were not together at this point.
Yeah, no, my parents separated at some point while they were here in the U.S. My mother remarried a American man. My mom lived in Broward during those years. So that's where we would split our time between Broward County and Miami-Dade.
So you graduate from high school, you go full-time with your dad, I guess.
To Miami full-time, yeah.
When do you get in? I mean, your father's in the food industry at this point. When do you start to pick this up?
I picked it up pretty early. My dad always made it clear that this would be a good skill for me to have and to learn when I was young. In case my wildest dreams would not come true, he says, now you have something to bounce back on. And he was right.
What were your wildest dreams?
I wanted to make music. I played the keyboard when I was very young. I played trumpet, and then I was in love with the guitar and alternative rock when I was really, really young. And then I got to the US and I heard rap music for the first time. And I said, this is everything I want to do. It was the easiest way for me to learn, to catch up with American culture, was listen to hip hop. Hip hop gave me insight into what the kids in school were referring to or what they were talking about. Because when you first come here, not only do you have to learn English, you have to also learn the lingo. Because if you don't, you won't understand what's happening, especially in school.
You actually released a few albums, did you not?
Yeah. I got pretty deep into it. I just couldn't make the industry work. I just didn't like it. I didn't like it.
So when did you look up and say, you know what? I guess your dad had been working in sushi bars. He was working with fish. When did you jump in?
2018. I want to say I said, okay, I'm done. 29. 28, I think it's time. If I'm going to dedicate myself to a craft, this would be the one. I'm not a stranger to it since I've been practicing it next to my dad. I kind of knew by most kitchen jobs that I had when I was young in my 20s, I kind of knew that I had a stronger base than most junior sushi chefs, no matter where I went. And then I knew that they didn't know that my dad was a sushi chef. And I kind of kept that as like an ace under my sleeve. And it allowed me to work 30, 35 hours in a sushi bar, I would get paid pretty well. And then I would have my evenings off to make music. That's kind of how I survived all my 20s. I really wanted to make music. So I needed one job that could pay me well, but didn't necessarily make me work a whole lot. And that was the sushi chef.
I'm still looking for that job.
We'll be right back.
The average American is not going to think Peruvian sushi, of course. Where does that come from?
For me, from my dad. My dad had a career change. My dad had like a bachelor's degree in business administration in Peru. He was, an entrepreneur. He had an ice cream shop. He had a shoe store. This was kind of the switch he made as soon as he got to the U.S. He loved working in a restaurant from the first time he tried it. And he said, I think I found something I want to stick to. So when I came to the U.S., I started learning about sushi through my dad. Then later on in life, I would reconnect with Peru after I maybe did not travel back home for a good 9-10 years before I went back. So when I went back, I realized, there's this huge influence of Japanese on Peruvian cuisine. And then I reconnected I kind of have my foundation from my dad, which is like classic sushi, but I wanted to reconnect with flavors that I had growing up. And so I ended up leaning towards the Peruvian-Japanese side.
Which is called Nikkei?
Nikkei.
Nikkei.
Nikkei really means Japanese food outside of Japan.
Historically, why is there Japanese food in Peru?
We had a massive migration during the late 1800s, early 1900s, not just to Lima, but also to Brazil, to Sao Paulo specifically, where two of the largest populations of Japanese people outside of Japan are. And so for the last 100 years plus, you've had Japanese families who have dedicated themselves to adapting their Japanese cuisine, but with Peruvian ingredients or Brazilian ingredients, like I was saying. And then you have Nikkei food, which is really not one chef who came up with this idea and said, I think these two cuisines would do well. But you're talking about dozens and dozens and dozens of generations who have practiced this food in their own homes in countries they adapted. So I think that's the beauty of this cuisine, is that it's very organic in a sense.
What is it? Give me some examples.
I'd say our ceviche is the perfect example of Nikkei food. A modern ceviche is Nikkei. It's no longer Peruvian or traditional Peruvian. Peruvians adapted sashimi from Japanese people.
In what way?
For a long period of time before Japanese people came to Peru, we would cook our fish or shellfish in citrus overnight, let the citrus cook the fish all the way through, and then you would enjoy your ceviche the next day. When Japanese cooks came to Peru, they taught us sashimi, which is how Japanese believe it's the best way to eat high quality raw fish.
Fresh raw fish. Yeah.
So we've adapted that now. Anytime you go to a Peruvian restaurant and you order ceviche, you will get raw fish. And then it's been lightly cured, meaning that fish was tossed with citrus 30 seconds before it was put on a plate.
That's the professional path you followed that got you a Michelin star and now this James Beard Award. Let's talk about how you got there. So you're in the States, your father's a sushi chef, you're developing an interest in cooking as a profession. I guess your sister's jumping in as well. What happened here?
I think Val knew she wanted to be part of the hospitality industry fairly young in life. And as we were just growing up, we happened to both be in the same industry. At some point, my dad wanted to open a sushi bar in a food hall that was called St. Roch Market. This was 2017.
At this time, were you full-time working as a sushi chef in town, or?
No, I was making music. I was actually working as a private chef, and my dad wanted to open this.
So dad says he wants to open something in a food hall. Pick up the story from there.
It just so happens that Val was working for Mike Solo. He happened to close the restaurants that he had down here in Miami. Val was offered an opportunity, I think, to go to Sahaf. And my dad was opening the same week. And then I think we just spoke and said, hey, you know what? Instead of going to Philly, why don't we just help dad open this and stabilize it? And then we'll kind of part ways again. But maybe we'll just help him because he hasn't done a food hall before. Maybe it'll be a much different operation than in a restaurant. No, we had done a restaurant before. And that was it. We never left.
Hold on. I missed that. When had you done a restaurant?
We opened a restaurant in 2014. This was a Peruvian-Japanese restaurant with a kosher license in Surfside. My dad worked for the Jewish community, I want to say a good 20, 21 years in Surfside. He would operate a lot of kosher sushi bars. Because of
Sabbath.
he would have the ability to pick us up on Friday night instead of going to work. And then he would be able to hang out with us all Saturday morning, and he didn't have to go back to work till Saturday night. Kosher sushi bars gave him that flexibility on the schedule. So as long as Val and I were in school, that's kind of what his schedule was like. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. He would have Friday night off, Saturday afternoon, and then Sunday all day.
And then you'd go back to your mom.
Yeah. Well, for 4 years, I did that. Val maybe a little bit longer. She was a little bit, younger.
So you'd opened a restaurant. You were still trying to make music. Now you open in a food hall and you're serving Nikkei cuisine?
Yeah, but it was more like what my dad's very classic. So it was, I don't want to say, look, it was just different. It was very classic. It was maybe tuna tataki with a spicy ponzu, which isn't really Nikkei. Sure, there's a little bit of Peruvian pepper in the ponzu, and that gives you a little bit of flair, but that's not really how Val and I would look at Nikkei food. But that's kind of how my dad wanted, which allowed him to do his traditional tuna tataki, but we would maybe tweak the sauce, and then it didn't complicate the pickup on a dish. And then that was our happy medium with our dad. My dad's never really cared to advance Nikkei food, or my dad always was like, I'm trying to run a business so you guys can have a future.
Okay, now the name of this place was?
Itamae.
And it became a hit, right? I mean, the New York Times noticed it. You got a Bib Gourmand in the Michelin Guide.
Yeah.
That must have come as a surprise.
Yeah, we've been very fortunate. Even before any national media covered us, the few writers and true OG Miami bloggers that were in Miami writing about food had shown us love from day one, because we offered a very different take on food hall food. I mean, you literally had my dad, Val, and I, all the three of us working the line. Every dish was made by the three of us. It was just a weird thing. It was like, how are we getting this quality from this 50-foot stall? We don't understand. And Miami kind of fell in love with that. It truly, truly supported us. The food hall days were some of our best days. We did really well for a food hall. We did really well.
Okay, but answer a question that you asked.
Mm-hmm.
How are you getting that quality out of a 50-foot counter?
Like I said, because Val, my dad, and I were working. So every sauce, everything that we cut, every sushi roll went through our hands. Which, in a restaurant, the bigger you get, the more food has to be made by different hands and other people. And that's the challenge, is can your cooks replicate how you cook? And then our job as chefs is like, what's my middle ground? How easy can I make it so these cooks are consistent with all these pickups? For us in the food hall, we were going to have incredible control because the three of us were working and we didn't really have many other people.
Coming right back.
Now, this spawned, this was a food hall. The next step, I guess, was going to be a brick and mortar. Your sister opened it. You joined her. How? And I'm going to mispronounce the name. Is it Maty's or Maty's?
Maty's.
Maty was your grandmother, correct?
Martha, yeah. And her nickname was Maty. So that's why we named the restaurant Maty's. Yeah, Val opened Maty's in 2023. By then, I was 5.5 years into Miami Design District Mall. So she said, hey, look, there's a PDR that's attached to the restaurant. It has a counter.
What?
A PDR, a private dining room.
And she said,
come in and take it over. And finally, you can leave the mall, which the mall came with a lot of complications. It was not the greatest of deals that we had signed.
Did your father depart the business at some point here? Retire?
No, my father's not retiring anytime soon.
Oh, so he's still involved in all your businesses?
Absolutely. He's still the boss.
Gotcha. So you guys, with Dad as the boss, you moved on to Maty's?
Yep. And then at Maty's, I was able to change the format for Itamae. It went from a la carte to tasting. And that's what we've done in the last year, which has been nicknamed AO.
So this is a bifurcated restaurant. Your sister is running the main restaurant, Maty's,
Mhm.
serving what kind of food?
It's Peruvian food, but it's progressive in a sense of we use seasonal ingredients. We prioritize seasonality over, let's say, bringing you product from Peru. We'd rather replicate some of the things that we've done in Peru, but with local domestic ingredients. And that's the beauty of Maty's.
Like what?
Like squash, for example. We use a lot of squash in the north of Peru, but we don't import any. We rather use squash that grows here in Florida, like Seminole pumpkin squash.
And how would it be prepared? What would I enjoy it with?
I'm going to prepare it the same way I would prepare in Peru. If I braise squash, it's just I'm not bringing you Peruvian squash. This is Florida squash. That in itself changes a dish. It changes the profile. If squash here is sweeter, it's going to change how we approach that dish. But that's the emphasis. It's like, don't cheat. Don't bring in the Peruvian product to make it taste the same. Find a new balance to a new dish. And that's kind of what Maty's is like.
You're a co-owner of Maty's, right?
Yeah, I'm chef partner. Yeah.
But most of your time goes into what had been that private dining room, which is called
Itamae AO.
AO, meaning?
Blue. AO is blue in Japanese.
Okay, so she says, take over this little room. Now, it's got 8 seats, right? I mean, it's a counter.
10.
Oh, pardon me. I cheated you by like 20% there.
10 seats at the counter.
So you have an opportunity to open this place. It's going to be Nikkei cuisine.
Mm-hmm.
What'd you do?
I left them all. I changed the format and we started serving similar flavors to what we've always done as Itamae, which I believe it's great quality of seafood, strong salt, acidic spice levels, very much like in your face kind of flavor profiles, highlighting lots of subtropical fruits that we obviously have here in Miami. We just changed the fact that instead of you choosing on an a la carte menu, we wanted to guide every guest through a journey of like, hey, I want you to have all these things that would encompass what a dinner would be in a Peruvian seafood restaurant. So it's not like in the Japanese sense, it's not very forward with nigiri. It's not like you're going to get a traditional miso soup or a chawanmushi. We very much are more like a tasting menu than a omakase.
One reviewer wrote, give up on trying to follow along and embrace the joy of uncharted territory. That seem fair?
That's pretty cool. I wish everybody welcomed us like that, but...
Is your food a little too out there for some folks?
I guess. Yeah, I guess. The way I've gone through our reviews after a year, I think it's a bit polarizing sometimes. I've had people who think our food isn't worth much. And I have people who go, that's cool. I've never had that before. And I'll definitely be back to, it really depends on the person. And yeah, I mean, even if we were super consistent and the best, you're always going to get people who don't like something. You're always going to get that one guest. If a counter is full, maybe there's 8 people who are having a great time. And then there's always 2 people who don't like that the other 8 people are having a better time than they are. So, it happens. I always tell the counter chef, I'm not always the chef at the counter, but whoever's working the counter, I always emphasize reading body language is obviously extremely important in what we do, because we really are watching their reactions for 2 hours. You're watching them. Yeah, we don't take it personal. We just know, hey, this isn't for everybody, and that's okay. I cook with spice, and I'm not going to tone it down because some people don't like spice. So what we do is we try to communicate to our guests in every way that we can that we will cook how we like to eat. But some guests will read that and still want to come in knowing they don't eat spice. And then when they sit down and they really have something spicy, they're going to tell you that was the worst dinner I've ever had. I couldn't taste anything after. It's really not that big of a deal. It's just that your spice tolerance is so low that you had a spicy dish and it overwhelms your palate, and now you really just are not comfortable anymore. You start sweating a little bit and you're like, oh, what did this do to me?
Tell me about some of the dishes. I assume the menu changes based on what's available, but what's on today? What am I going to find?
Today, you're going to start off with a katsu.
Which is?
It's a katsu that meets a Peruvian causa, a potato dish, a very classic potato dish that's made in Peru.
And what's a katsu?
Katsu is like a Milanese, like fried fish. Have you ever had like fried pork cutlets in Japan or in Japanese food?
Yeah.
That's one of katsu. But we make ours with a fish Milanese, and we serve it over potato. It is dressed with scabeche, ikura jam, like salmon roe jam, and then pickles. People like that, but it's a strong dish. That's your first course. Then you're going to move on to sashimi course. Sashimi course, usually we serve between 3 to 4 different types of fish or shellfish with 3 different sauces. The idea is for you to try a lean, a fatty fish, and then 2 different types of texture with some kind of mollusk or shellfish. Then we'll move on to sweet potato gnocchis with lobster and lobster bisque. Then you'll have smoked sea bream with squash, which is in season right now. And then finish with a rice course. We usually finish with a rice course, like a paella and meets like porridge. So right now we're serving gui duck clam and a seaweed, like a green seaweed rice. Very deep marine flavor. I like it, but it's strong. You know, if you don't like seaweed, you may have a reaction to like, whoa, what is this?
There are people who are not predisposed to gooey duck based on what it looks like. I'm looking at some of the dishes that have been mentioned in reviews. Hokkaido scallops cured in kombu. I need to know what kombu is. Fried apple banana, ahi charapita salt, and osetra caviar. What the hell is that?
It's like a classic nigiri that we make at Itamae. The Hokkaido scallops are cured with kombu, which is Japanese algae, a dried kelp. Tradition used to do kombu jime, which is like aging, like with in curing with kombu and a little bit of sake that gets rubbed. Once that texture changes on the scallop, then we utilize the scallop as a nigiri. It's served with apple banana. Apple banana is a small sweet banana that we have here in South Florida that we also have in South America. It's called plátano manzano. And then you have ají charapita, which is an Amazonian pepper that currently grows here now in Miami. There's somebody growing it here in Miami, and a little bit of caviar, of course. So the idea here is that when you come to our Itamae, if you're going to get one nigiri, you're going to get something like this, which is a scallop that has a sweet but very tart and a little bit spicy sauce on the top. Then you have a little bit of salt flakes and a little bit of caviar to finish off. That's like a nigiri we would serve here instead of brushing it with soy and putting a little bit of salt.
Where the hell do you come up with these ideas? Were you born with this?
No, I think it's nostalgia. I think it's also learning. So the first time I had a ceviche in an Amazonian restaurant in Lima, they served the ceviche with sweet but blanched banana, like chunks of banana. So you look at it, you're like, okay. And then you eat it and you realize, oh, the sweetness of a banana, when you get this highly salty and acidic sauce and fish, actually goes really well. That's how I get inspired to do these things. It's like drawing a little bit from something I grew up having or that I want my guests to, I want to be able to tell this story, like where this came from. And then 2, whatever is available in Miami for seasons. Which I think will continue to make Itamae unique is that no matter where we go, if we ever decide to open in another city, the core of it can always be Peruvian-Japanese, but you can always use whatever it's surrounding it to really, really make it special.
Beyond this particular Nikkei, I have been surprised more broadly that Peruvian cuisine has not, in my view, had a moment yet in America. I have assumed or expected or perhaps had hoped for a long time that America would wake up and say, man, there's some great food coming out of that country, and it doesn't seem to happen. Why is that?
I don't know. I'll give you some pushback.
Please.
I think Peruvian food is having a moment. I think 8 years ago, God, I don't know how this will go with my peers, but I'll give you some tea. 8 years ago, I think one of the most important Peruvian restaurants in America opened, which is Llama Inn in New York City. Eric Ramirez. Eric Ramirez for me, because mind you, I grew up in America now. So my heroes and the cooks that I was looking up to weren't necessarily the Peruvian chefs who were being highlighted back at home. You know, I really needed to connect with Peruvians living in America because that's me. First time I went to Llama Inn in Brooklyn, I realized that I had never had Peruvian food like I was having there. Chef Eric's done tremendous things. That group has done tremendous things. I think without an Eric Ramirez, I'm not sure if Val and I obviously are like use him as our biggest inspiration, but there was definitely a moment for Val and I to say that is cool. That is somebody doing Peruvian food with no boundaries. He's not trying to replicate everything we had at home. And I think it plants a seed that when you have the opportunity to do Peruvian food, maybe you'll take that approach instead of the approach that we see very commonly done here, specifically in South Florida, because we have the most amount of Peruvian restaurants in the US. Everybody has the same menu. Everybody kind of saw Gaston Acurio reach the pinnacle of success for Peruvian food, and they've kind of copied the menus that his restaurants provide. Greatest hits, if you want to call it. It's kind of like looking at American Chinese food. It's the same. It's not really Chinese food, but you can't say that Chinese food hasn't had a moment in America. Oh, it has. It's going to be had in every American household. Now, sure, Peruvian has not reached that level. I agree with you on that. But I do think it's having a moment. It's just taking us, it's a different approach. You know, I think Val winning last year for Maty's, I think AO being recognized as doing very different Peruvian-Japanese food. Like, I am very proud to tell you, Itamae is not something you're going to find in Lima. I don't care where you travel to in Peru, you're not going to find the kind of food that we do. We've taken a lot of what grows here in the US and in Miami and adapted that and made that our true identity instead of relying on wanting to replicate things back at home. Obviously, it helped us distinguish ourselves. But I think just like I'm telling you that we saw Eric, I think other younger Peruvian chefs are looking at Val and I. And when those chefs have the opportunity to cook, it's going to be different. I think in the next 10 years, we no longer will have these restaurants that are serving the same menu. The ajire gallina, lomo saltado, chaufa, 3 ceviches, 3 tiaritos, 3 causas, and that's it. Now I have a Peruvian restaurant. It's so boring to Val and I because we weren't comparing these restaurants to Peru. We were comparing these restaurants to the best in New York or the best in America. And that's kind of the legacy that we want to leave. So I think it's having a moment. It's just, it's getting there.
What's the future for you? You kind of implied that maybe there will be expansion to other places.
Yeah, it's always been my dream, you know. I love Miami. I'm very proud to have grown up here. But I'll just put it plainly, I think there's a part of me that wants to see our food compete with the best. And I'm not sure, no, I am sure that I'm not going to find that in Miami. I hope that at some point the opportunity to cook maybe in Los Angeles or New York would come, but obviously that's not a reality at the moment, you know. But sure, if you ask me, I would tell you I would love to see Itamae in a city where maybe the foodie himself or herself is a little more serious to really know how good are we really, or are we just good because we're surrounded by other Peruvian food and we're just very distinct, or are we good because we can also survive among the best Italian, among the best Spanish, among the best American modern, like that's what I'm saying. And at some point I'd like that opportunity. Yeah.
The evidence would seem to suggest the latter. Michelin star, James Beard. There are some folks who obviously feel you're doing a hell of a job, and congratulations to you. I want to mention one other thing that I took away from your speech at the James Beard Awards. You stood up for the importance of immigration. You want to tell me about that?
I think I wanted to really emphasize that it felt to me like that night, everybody in our industry, especially the James Beard Foundation, had made a pretty clear statement about how we felt about these issues. It was very important to feel that. I'd never been really to a James Beard Award night. It was one of the first times, I guess, in my career when I realized the power of the chefs that I've been growing up with, that they all really took a moment to recognize these things. And this foundation, which knows that immigrants are the backbone of all this, had no issue, I guess, putting this to the forefront, which nowadays, I think big corporations are being very careful with what they say. The James Beard Foundation threw that out the window.
The quote from your acceptance speech that truly struck me was, "All food is immigrant, and immigrants make America great."
Yeah. I mean, all food has traveled. All food has gone from one family to the next, to generations, to from one village to all food has traveled. All food has no boundaries, no limits, no borders, none of that. I mean, what American doesn't enjoy Mexican food? We love it. Whether you have Mexican heritage or not, we love Mexican food, but we're trying to kick Mexican people out. But this is such a layered conversation, obviously. But what I said at the end was also, yeah, you don't have to tell us, which is we know that we are the backbone to this industry, and we know it. You don't have to patronize us. Nobody's up here telling their story of immigration to be patronized or to look like a token person. This really is us speaking for dishwashers, for our preps, for our line cooks, for people that cannot speak really at this moment. And that's what it's about. And I think sometimes it could come across, especially on social media, as, yeah, like patronage. Like people are being patronized sometimes because fear of saying the wrong thing, and that's not the point here. I think what most people are trying to tell you is, if we end up kicking everybody out, you may also kick out all these wonderful stories like mine. And I think that's what people were trying to say that night. Whether you're a third generation Italian or fifth or sixth generation Italian immigrant, or you're a second generation Venezuelan immigrant, like it doesn't really matter. Unfortunately, we're in a tough time to have these conversations. Nina Compton, Chef Nina, had gone up to stage to present the award. And I remember sitting there as she's gone up, she's about to read the categories. I know that my category is up next. And I see her come up. This is somebody who I personally have looked up to because one of my business partners, Eric, loves Chef Nina, loves her food, loves the restaurant. And so when we spoke about restaurants or food, he would always talk about Nina. And when I got to know her and understand her story and her journey and things that she champions, when she went up on stage, it just kind of reassured me that if you are lucky enough to go up and receive this, that is the legacy that you're following. It is a chef like Nina Compton's legacy is kind of our legacy. Chef Nina was here in Miami for I don't know how many years, giving us her best. And at some point she left to New Orleans, and I think Compère Lapine opened there, and she never looked back because, in a sense, like the question you were asking me before, I'm still an immigrant. I'm not a stranger to have to move for a better opportunity or for a chance to continue. So I keep that in perspective.
Chef, what you have achieved is remarkable, and the accolades are well-deserved. I cannot thank you enough for taking the time to chat with me today. I very much appreciate it. And more sustained good luck moving forward.
Thank you so much. And thank you for your time. And hopefully I'll see you in Miami if you ever stop by. Please come and visit. We'd love to have you here.
Well, I'll see you there.
Absolutely. Have a great one.
Chef Nando Chang, and there's more to the story. Just a few weeks after our conversation, Chef announced he's closing the restaurant where it's been and is searching for a new location. Maybe in Miami, maybe someplace else. In the meantime, he's doing some pop-ups, including a couple in New York. That's Culinary Characters Unlocked. I'm David Page, and I'll see you next time.